Hi guys, so following on from last time's video where we were learning how to draw text, in this video I'm going to show you how you can draw some basic shapes in RPGWizard. So we're going to be looking at how to draw things like rectangles, circles, lines, rounded rectangles, and how to draw both filled and just outlines of those shapes. So if you start typing RPG code again, and you just put draw in, you're going to see next to like draw text, there are some functions for drawing shapes too. So I'm just going to run you through kind of each of these shapes and show you how you can use them. So the first one I'm going to look at is how to draw a rectangle. So when drawing a rectangle, it's similar to text in the sense that you need to tell it where you want the top left corner of the rectangle to begin drawing from, and then you specify the width and height of the rectangle, and you can also specify how thick you want the line of the rectangle to be drawn. So this type of rectangle is just an outline that's not filled with any color. So I'm just going to show you how to draw that. And for this tutorial, we don't need to worry about the canvas ID. We're not going to use that parameter in our function calls. So I just double clicked on that and it kind of auto completed the input for me. So I'm now just going to change some of these. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove canvas ID because we don't need that for this. And then I'm going to specify where I want it to be drawn. So I'm going to go 25, 25. I'm going to make it 100 in its width and 50 in its height, and I'm going to give it a line width of 2. So that's all you actually need to actually tell the engine to draw a rectangle, and then you just need to actually say, I have something to render, please render it. So I'm just going to do called render now, and then I'm going to remove that. So this is going to draw a rectangle for us. And it's going to be like white by default. So we have this nice kind of white rectangle by default. And you can do things like adjust the X, the Y, and the size. So that's simply how to draw a rectangle. Very easy. Next, I'm just going to quickly show you how to draw a circle. So again, you just go RPG code .draw circle. And you'll see again with circles, you've got similar kind of parameters. You have an X, a Y, you have a radius, which defines the radius of the circle. So from the central point, how wide do you want the circle to be around its entire circumference? So we're just gonna do that again. So I'm going to remove canvas ID again. I'm going to set this to be 50x, 125y, and I'm going to give it a radius of 25. So this is going to give me a circle, I think 50 in actual width and 25 in radius. So, and I've had to shift it a good bit down so it doesn't actually overlap with the rectangle. So I'm going to save that, and now we're going to see both a rectangle and a circle. And there you go. So you see how easy it is to draw shapes in RPGWizard? There's all these very useful and handy functions for drawing kind of simple shapes. So similar to that, we also have a line drawing function. So again, RPG code, draw line. And if you take a look at the parameters, you're looking at, now with lines, it's a bit different. You don't specify the width and height of a line. It's more the X1, Y1, X2, Y2 kind of information that you need to give it to draw a line, similar to the way you would in geometry or anything like that. So, but you can specify a line width again. You couldn't actually specify a line width with circle, which is possibly something that may change in the future. But for now, you can't do it. So again, if you just double click that, it will auto-complete some of the parameters. Remove canvas ID. Now I'm going to set this one to be 25, 175. So that's the first X, that's X1, Y1. And then 150, 175. I'll give it a line width of 3 this time. So now we're going to see a rectangle, a circle, and a line kind of all in sequence. And there you go. And you can see that the line is a little bit thicker than, say, the rectangle, which is actually 2. So yeah, so specifying the thickness does make a difference. There is also another slight variation on rectangles too. It's called rounded rectangle. And basically what a rounded rectangle is it can curve the corners of the rectangle to make them more rounded in appearance. So I'll quickly show you that too. So that's under rpgcode.draw rounded rectangle. And it's pretty similar to drawing a rectangle, apart from it has an extra parameter, which is the radius of the corners. So if I just double click that, remove the canvas ID, it's nearly identical in the sense of the information you need to provide it, apart from that extra parameter. So 25, just going to draw below the line, specify the width and height as you would with drawing a normal rectangle. Give it a line width of 1, and this is the different part, and this is the radius, and the bigger you set this number, the more extreme the rounding on the corners is going to look. So I'm going to set this to 10, so hopefully that will be kind of apparent that they're being rounded. And you can see straight away, yeah, so they're really being rounded here. So, you know, you can increase that to even more, like 25, and run that again, and you can see that it starts to become more of like a sausage shape. The bigger the radius on the corners become. So that's actually how you draw kind of simple unfilled shapes. So we can do things like change the color of those shapes too. So now when it comes to changing colors, again with drawing, you need to change the color before calling the draw. So if I want to draw a red rectangle, I have to say please set the color red before actually doing the draw. So I'm just going to set it to red. So I'm going to set it to 255 in the R, which means give me the most red color you can, 0 in the green and 0 in the blue, and then 1 for the alpha value. And then for the circle, I'm going to make the circle green, so I'm going to specify 0 here, 255 here, give me the highest intensity of green. And similarly for the line, I'm going to get blue. And then for the rounded rectangle, I'm going to just combine red and green, and I think that will give me yellow. So now we're going to see the shapes, and they're all going to be drawn with different colors. Yeah, there you go. So you got a red rectangle, a green circle, etc. So that's kind of like the basics of drawing shapes. And there's one important thing to point out when it comes to actually drawing shapes and any kind of drawing in RPGWizard, is that if they're on the same canvas, which means that they're on the kind of the same layer, and you kind of want to overlap two shapes, let's say I want the circle to be drawn above the rectangle, so I'm just going to shift this circle's position a bit. I'm going to shift it to maybe more like 100, and hopefully this will kind of draw it over top. So basically whichever draw function you call last will mean that piece of text or that shape will be drawn above whatever is drawn previous to it, if they're in the same kind of coordinates. So if you want to have like things drawn over each other, so it's slightly overlapping here, and you can just about make out that the top of the circle is covering this line of the rectangle. So that's just something important to note. So it's like if you were on a piece of paper and then you drew the rectangle, and then you kind of drew the circle on the same piece of paper overlapping the rectangle, you'd obviously have a circle that covers a bit of the rectangle. Okay, so that's the basics on terms of drawing unfilled shapes. So these are unfilled. Now I'm going to draw some filled versions of these shapes too. So I'm just going to put in a comment here. So a comment is just something you can put into your code file to help you kind of break it up into sections, and maybe you want to give yourself a hint. So if you do double backslash, you get a basic JavaScript comment, and you can write something in here. And this isn't code, it's more like a note for yourself. Okay, so this section is drawing unfilled shapes, and now we're going to look at filled versions of those shapes. Okay, so just like with the actual drawer, there is pretty much a filled version of all these shapes available too in RPGWizard. So again, if you type RPG code and you type fill, you'll see that you have the option to do a filled circle, a filled rectangle, and a filled rounded rectangle. So obviously there's no filled line because a line is already filled. It can't be filled. So I'm just going to take the fill rect. So I'm going to set the color again back to red. So I'm going to copy this up here, and then I'm going to draw red. So it's pretty much the same. So we can just copy what we have up here. You'll note that there is no line width parameter because it is completely filled. So I'm going to remove the line width. I don't need that. And I'm going to shift the X of the shape enough that it will be drawn to the right of the original rectangle. So now we should get a filled rectangle too. And there you have a perfectly kind of filled rectangle with a solid color. And we can do the same for the circle. Pretty much can just copy the same information here, but we need to just shift the X enough across that it will be drawn on its own. So, and I'm also going to set the color to green again too. So I'm just going to find the draw circle, copy that, set it to green, and I'm going to run that. And then we got a filled circle. Now you can't do a filled line as I mentioned, so we're just going to do a filled rounded rectangle. And again, it's pretty much all the same information. Apart from you cannot specify the line width. So I'm just going to take this 225. So I'm not going to do a copy here because there's some differences that make it a bit difficult. So I'm just going to type it in. So radius 25, canvas ID. So I'm going to take the color again. This is going to draw us a filled rounded rectangle. And I've drawn it, but it's actually right on top of the original one. So I've made a mistake in terms of its positioning. So I forgot to shift the X in that case. So I'm just going to shift the X across enough, 225 maybe. So, yeah. And that's the filled variations of all these shapes too. Also, when it comes to setting the color, you can do things like set the alpha to a different value. So it's set to 1 here, but I could set that to like 0.5, and you'll see a kind of like transparent version of the rounded rectangle. And that's kind of the basics in terms of shapes. If you need to draw like a more complicated shape, like a triangle, at the minute you would have to draw it using like 3 lines, for example. There is no way to fill a triangular area or a custom area at the minute, but hopefully that will be added soon. So at the minute this is kind of these shapes are, I think, sufficient enough to create most things that you want to draw. And you might be asking, where can I actually use this kind of stuff? Just to give you an example, I'm going to switch to the tactical example in RPGWizard, just to show you where this kind of stuff is actually used. So I'm just going to run the game, and you'll see that this message window pops up. And now this message window is actually drawn from those basic shapes we talked about. So we actually have the kind of white outline of a rounded rectangle here. Then we have a filled rounded rectangle. This one's actually filled with a gradient, and I'll probably try to quickly show you that too. And if I just kind of skip past this, so that was the kind of dialog box. It was made up of it's actually made up of like 4 shapes. So there's 2 rounded rectangles, 2 filled rounded rectangles. You'll also see here, when it's going through kind of the tutorial section, it's kind of drawing these circles around these characters to kind of highlight them, these NPCs, to highlight them as units. And also when you like left click on this unit, all these green squares are drawn using the draw rectangle function. And again, there were some circles there. And here's some text drawn next to these units. And that's all drawn with all those drawing functions that we've covered. And that kind of covers the basic drawing functions in RPGWizard. So in the next episode, I might take a look at drawing images in RPGWizard.